You hear me? Oh, now you can hear me. Jesus Christ. All right. Hi. Hi, this is loud. Okay, cool. I guess we can do this. Is it time? It's actually time. All right, so hey, this is world building with props and ephemera. Let's click the next thing. That's me. I'm Karla. Wow, amazing. I've been in the game industry for, I think, almost 25 years now, maybe actually 25 years. I've done a lot of different jobs and combinations of jobs. Animation, modeling, graphic design, research, narrative editing, narrative design, writing, design proper. This is a lot of jobs. I'm indie, so I get to try more things than in big companies. My job title isn't tied to my review schedule or anything. I mostly don't know what to call myself. When people are like, "What's your title?" I'm like, and sometimes I think of myself as a dramaturge. Which, okay, also, if Ed Coates were here, we gave the UI talk. Look at this kerning. This is between the A and the T. Oh, it's so upsetting. I couldn't fix it. They wouldn't Google Slides will not let me fix it. It's so upsetting to me. Anyway, so you can make the argument that the variety of world building I'm going to talk about is indeed dramaturgy, at least in large part. And that's the credit there to Danny Manley, who's a writer in games, who made that connection for me because he works in theater, and I have never worked in theater. So he was like, "You're just doing dramaturgy," and I'm like, "What?" And so what dramaturgy actually is the practical discipline of concretizing an actual theater play as a physical occurrence on stage, taking it from the words that sit on the page to a thing that you can actually perceive and engage with. Almost anything can fall under the dramaturgy umbrella. It's adapting words and ideas to the real thing. So anything you can think of there, what kinds of social and political situations are present in the world when this scene takes place, and how would they influence it? What objects do the characters interact with? What kinds of things do they wear? What's on stage and what isn't? What does a character's social class mean for how they appear in a scene? Would this play become clearer or more interesting by making allusion to current events? That happens a lot with older plays. People try to sort of bring it into current space of thinking by drawing some connection between things that are happening today and things that were happening in the play that was perhaps written hundreds of years ago. This kind of synthesis of finding and bringing together information that touches every part of the piece of media concerned, it's not usually a job you can apply for in games. It's so interdisciplinary. Whatever skills you've got, it'll use them. And in games, you're doing dramaturgy when you figure out what the bad guy's lair will look like, what they wanted to put forth, what they wanted to show people, and why, what social ideas their evil plan is aligned with, what they're wearing, and how they prefer to communicate with their minions. I don't know why all these examples are about the bad guy, but whatever. If we accept that dramaturgy is a discipline in games, if not in the game industry as such, then world building kind of falls within its purview. This is just how I think about a lot of my work. You don't have to think of it this way if you don't want to. I do a much better job when I know as much as possible about the game and when I'm in close contact with others on the team who also know things about the game. So anyway, here's the games we're going to talk about. I've worked on a lot of games. The ones I'm going to talk about here are BioShock 2 and its story DLC, Minerva's Den, Gone Home, and Tacoma. They all have immersive sim bones, so they're well suited to giving the player information by experiencing diegetic world building in a location. Here's the basics, just so, in case you haven't played it recently. BioShock 2 is the sequel to BioShock 1. It takes place 15-ish years later. It's still sealed in Rapture, the undersea libertarian hellscape that Andrew Ryan built because he was an insufferable man. The player explores, gathers resources, fights, and learns about the events and people there. Minerva's Den is the story DLC for BioShock 2, made by a tiny team within the greater team at 2K Marin. Its conceptualization was like 60% world building because we had to fit it into the same world that had been established by the previous games. So we had like very clear limits, like parentheses within which we could make this DLC happen. Use the same storytelling channels, things like announcements, radio communications, graffiti, posters, audio logs, actual dialogue. But it did add a sad room at the end that had a lot of the protagonist's personal effects that you could then examine. Gone Home is a BioShock without combat, focusing entirely on the exploration story. I'm not kidding, it's real. You can throw objects wherever you want. Commensurate with this focus, the ephemera being like notes and paper things, like stuff you might put in a scrapbook, just sort of little collectible paper letters and notes. But like the ephemera and the objects are a much larger and more realized part of the game compared to BioShock's. Those things and audio diaries are most of the storytelling tools here. Gone Home's about a college student who returns to the house her family moved into while she was away to find that her family isn't there. The focus of the story is the player character's sister, Sam, and what she's been up to. It takes place in the 90s, and it sure looks like it. Tacoma is a Gone Home with holograms in space. The tools are much the same as in Gone Home, but there's also holograms of the inhabitants of the space station that can be observed. Okay, so the kind of world building I'm going to discuss is diegetic world building entirely. In case this isn't something that you know about, diegetic means it's a thing that's inside the world of the game. A soundtrack song playing in the background of a scene with no in-world source is not diegetic. But if that same song coming out of a character's stereo that like they turned on is diegetic. It's there in the scene with them. I just want to make a distinction between the stuff we're talking about here and things like lore via item text, as seen in this Katamari screenshot. We're not talking about that. We're talking about props and environmental items like Minmo, who grows strong and healthy. That is right there in the world, and that's that kind of thing. Diegetic storytelling, diegetic world building is, I think of as a subset of environmental storytelling. This is probably a pretty safe viewpoint, but if you're academics and you want to like fight about it, that's fine. So when you start out on a project, we got delivery mechanisms. When you start on a project that you're going to be world building for, it's smart to find out what ways of expressing that world building you'll be afforded. Gone Home had audio diaries, in-world models from small consumer items to furniture, newspaper clippings, notes, letters, that kind of thing. Didn't have direct conversation with NPCs, didn't have access to areas that are more about public life, didn't have emails, didn't have phone. One of the big restrictions of Gone Home, which was like an incredible restriction to have, it was really useful, was that anything that we wanted to talk about that happened outside the house had to have concrete evidence of it happening inside the house. Somehow that evidence had to make its way inside the house, or else we couldn't talk about it. And so this naturally colored the kinds of world building that we used. You can only use the tools you have available. So there's a certain amount of determining like what can be shown or mentioned, and then tailoring how that thing is put forth to the player. For BioShock 2, I did a lot of research. I researched everything from deep sea tech and disasters to psychological coercion, mimetic propaganda, and so many crackpot ideas. Rapture is entirely composed of crackpot ideas. My research was for the narrative team, so the writers could base dialogue and world concepts on ideas that are somewhat grounded. Some of this influenced the critical path of the game, and some didn't. I was doing dramaturgy. I also researched imagery from the time period. People living in Rapture might have stuff that was made in the 1920s if they're older, or they might have stuff made in the late 50s or maybe early 60s if they've been smuggling stuff in. It's supposed to be a sealed location, so they really weren't supposed to have stuff that was up to date with the actual time, the date that the game actually took place. They weren't supposed to have that stuff. So I tried to have as little 60s stuff as possible so that I could emphasize the trapped in amber isolation of Rapture. Imagery included period advertising, diving tech, product design, mugshots, social stuff, current events. In the middle there, those two like tent shanty towns, those are Hoovervilles, which they were shanty towns constructed during the Great Depression, and they were named after the American president at the time who did not actually do much to help people. So it was very rude, it was cruel, and it looked perfect. So all of this work, all this research, this contributed to world building, but it's not actually world building. I was making information available. It was research available to writers and artists if they needed it. The process of world building was undertaken by them. They chose what aspects of the research would be represented in the script and the art. I got to do some myself on that project only when I started making additional posters for the game. I'm not really that good a painter, so I used the skills that I had. I regularly checked my ideas for how these posters should look and what info they should convey with the creative director and the environment lead. This helped me sort of refine my eye for the project and determine how ideas can be depicted and what the tone and style and purpose of these items would be. Once you start actually getting into the world building and you're like, oh, this stuff, I can make stuff in the world and I can put it in the game. Once you get a little taste of power, it's important to not let it get out of proportion. World building is not available to the player as a thing they can comprehend until it's in the game somehow and they can experience it. If the player can't engage with it, it may as well not exist for them. So just bear that in mind. All that work that you're maybe doing might not be there. So okay, different ways of doing this. How does it work? One of the ways, some people do this, some people construct the world of a work first, before they do anything to do with the characters of the story. They place the events and characters inside of the world they create. In my experience, this is a little difficult. Some reasons why include it's impossible to tell when you're done. If you're making up a world, you can just keep going. You can go forever. We got an infinite world here, and you could have an infinite one on your hard drive. And that's potentially a whole lot of time and effort that you've put in for this. It's also easy to get into a situation where you get really interested in some part of the world that is hard to depict or tell a story within. There's potentially a huge amount of work that will probably mostly go unused in a literal sense. And you can potentially make a lot of untenable work for writers and artists chasing an idea or a little obsession that may or may not have a place in the actual game. You can end up with a conceptual map that basically doesn't fit the territory. Some people really love this method, though, because the best case scenario is that whatever actual game they made in this world gets really popular, and then they get to make a sequel in that world, and they're like, oh man, I already got the world, I'm already done, I already built it, I've already figured out what's here. Or they can make a wiki and release it, and then the sickos go crazy. Some people love that, it's real. So the other way that I think of doing this is more of a fog of war situation where you have your story, or you at least have parts of your story, and basically everywhere it touches, it uncovers something. It uncovers something that in the world where it touches. You can see a little way in that direction. You never really uncover everything. Information's revealed according to where you go. I think some people refer to these two paradigms as top-down versus bottom-up, or I don't know, whatever. Who cares? Anyway, the pros of world building in this way, in the fog of war style, it can squash and stretch into any space you give it. It's much easier to plan time for this, for the work, while making the game. There's much less struggle to include big blobs of information that are very cool, but not necessarily a good fit. It's usually easier for players to understand and retain because it'll be connected to ideas in the actual game. Things that actually happen, like chaining ideas together with things they actually experience. Very good cognitively. Insofar as there are downsides to this approach, it's potentially easier to leave ideas unconnected in the world, with each other. But you can keep an eye out for this. I come down on this side of things, on the fog of war side, because I think it has a better chance of making the world feel lived in, as if everywhere the story touches can illuminate a believable chunk of connected information. It's potentially a feeling of coherence and trust in the world, because wherever you lean, there's something there. So world building, in my experience, can have any of a number of jobs or functions. These are my favorites. They're what I've spent the most time with. We have reinforcing and connecting, specifying / illustrating, and complicating / adding. Here's a reinforcing connecting one. This poster. This is about reinforcing the web of connections between ideas or occurrences. This is from Minerva's Den. Rapture has these propaganda skits that play over the radio. The propaganda machine in Rapture is adept enough to build on those skits with other media like posters. It's like transmedia propaganda. This reinforces the idea of competence. In the propaganda, you're like, these guys know what they're doing. They can connect to these different venues of information. Like Andrew Ryan has control over all media. This makes sense to me. And this also reinforces the actual in-world diegetic message of the media being important to Rapture society. Like they're playing these over the radio because they think people need to hear them. This poster underlines some themes of the game, in addition to reinforcing the existence of the Rapture reminders, which were, there were these little skits. Public announcements doing a lot of world building themselves. It refers to the Jim and Mary skits from BioShock 1, in which Mary was sort of the goofus and Jim was the gallant. Do you know who goofus and gallant is? I made a little slide for it. Here's an example. They're weird, and like people don't know about this because they're old and strange. But Goofus here, Goofus is a little shit who does everything wrong, and Gallant is like the good boy, and all children should be like Gallant. So like look at it's perfect. Anyway, so like Mary would always have the wrong idea and just be like, I don't know how to do basic actions. And Jim would be reasonable and calm and like an everyday guy, but he does things in the way that Rapture does them. He's always correct. But like, of course, when you dig into it, the way that Mary reacted to ideas in Rapture was like really reasonable. It's like, it was often the player's perspective. The player was like, why wouldn't you not kill, dissidents? But they were very blatant propaganda. Like that was just their whole thing. Also, the sexism, extremely present in Rapture, present in Rapture's media. So here's one of the other jobs, which is specifying or illustrating. This is from Tacoma. It's just the label for a box of disposable gloves. Sarah in Tacoma is a doctor. A doctor needs disposable gloves. She will feel more like a real doctor if she has the tools and objects that we associate with doctors in her space. These are one aspect of that. It just specifies one literal item that she might have. So here's the actual texture sheet, and there's the reference material. I will go more into this. So this specificity means a lot of specific researched work to ground the object in the world. So like you can see, here's like, I just took each element from an existing reference point and was kind of like, okay, we got the count of the gloves, we got the description of the gloves, we got the little logo of the company, we have the headline, and you can see, you can basically see what's happening here. But I had to be very specific about what I was taking from the reference material so that it would still read as the right kind of object. You can see what's happening. You got it. So the third one, complicating or adding. This allows a player to discover a piece of knowledge that fits in with others they already have. These are fun curiosities that maybe make you think or are interesting while fleshing out small pieces of the world. These examples are from Tacoma, which takes place in 2088. This lab-grown tuna salad, nobody ever mentions this out loud, but the package looks plausible and it's fun to discover. I'll talk more about this in a sec. And then with Sarah's diploma, like, there's some ways in which it's not a normal diploma. Like, first of all, it's got 2080 on it. And second of all, she's got a microgravity certification ribbon. And like, of course, in the future where you can just go to space and there's a major space station that's like a medical space station, like you're gonna get microgravity certified. You're like, it's gonna be part of your coursework. So like, this is just it's like, oh yeah, she's a doctor. I guess she would do this. This makes sense. That's what I'm going for here. So like, this is essentially a conceptual charm bracelet. What little ideas can hang off of bigger, more critical path ideas? They can't individually become so big and heavy that they won't fit on the charm bracelet anymore, but they can be satisfying details in reach of those who take a little time. They should strengthen the critical path. They work with it. This can potentially make use of the IKEA effect, which is one of my favorite cognitive phenomena, this is what we call the name for the increase in perceived value that occurs when a person puts something together themselves. Like literally when you build a piece of furniture from IKEA, you will value it more than if you had just bought it ready-made. You'll be like, I made that. That's mine. And like even if you did a bad job, you'll still be like, but I put effort into it. That's my chair. And so we can apply this to games really easily because people in a lot of games, the player gets to put together information. You get to figure things out. You get to make leaps from one piece to the next. You don't have to tell the player every little thing. You don't have to define everything. It's actually really satisfying for the player to connect some dots. That feeling of discovery and understanding is actually really precious and valuable to give to your players, and I value it highly. So anyway, back to the tuna salad. I love this stuff. This has some like solid branding principles at work in it. You can see that my reference material on the right, this is like real life prepackaged tuna salad. None of it has anything even like a real fish on it. Like it's just like, so you can see that my packaging, my label, is divergent from the general design consensus. So like, why did I do that? How did I screw this up? It's because tuna salad, this like stuff they got on the crackers, it's abstracted away from the actual fish. Nobody really wants to think of like a literal chunk of fish they're putting on the cracker, and when it's just tuna salad. So we're happy to think of it as just like, it's a thing I put on a cracker. I don't know what it's made of. And yeah, it's an abstract concept now, rather than something that definitionally needs to show it's made of a fish. But in Tacoma, the interesting thing is that it's made from lab-grown meat. Like we had this conceit in the world that humans had figured out how to, just grow meat like in a vat, basically, as opposed to on an animal. And it was never part of an actual fish. It was grown in a vat. So to remind people of the central meaning of the food, I used a fish scale pattern. I emphasized the actual fishness of the fishless fish. This is essentially like, it's the same idea as putting like a really beautiful picture of a piece of fruit on a bag of like fruit-flavored candy. Like, the candy isn't the fruit, and we know the candy isn't the fruit, but the package wants to make sure you associate the candy with the fruit. And it's just like, remember, it's real. And so, yeah, when I made this label, though, I kept the color scheme from the reference. I was like, clearly these teals and blues are really important. So I kept that, so there's some connectivity between these ideas. But we went in a slightly different direction due to the needs of the object. So world building in games is pretty culturally dependent. Here's a couple of pictures that Derek Liu, who's a great trailer guy and a cool dude, he has cute cats also, but he took some pictures of this cat litter in France. Maybe you'll know about this, but it's also a German package. But he, an American person, was like, when he looked at this, he was like, it's a bed, it's a cat bed, it's not cat litter. Why is the cat in a bed? That's not what you do with cat litter. And so like for him, North American, he was like, these ideas don't go together. Like iconographically crossing the streams, it can be confusing for players. It's much better to be clear. But when it comes to cross-cultural ideas of what's appropriate, this gets hard to figure out what's clear. So you basically just have to play test your game with the target audience and ask them real specific questions about what they understood from the objects in the game. The games I've worked on have had to do a lot of this because so much hangs on the player's understanding of these props. Like half the game is just this, so like we better be sure players are getting it. But yeah, you just have to ask people about what they understand. Here's the label from our kitty litter in Tacoma. Does this seem clearer? It does to me, but I'm from North America. It doesn't have the sleep aspect to it, but yeah, this is like, there's a lot of ideas here. Anyway, so back to these guys. I made these in like 2010. What are these for? What do these posters give us? Like, what good are they? So number one, they're a reminder of how important commerce and advertising is in Rapture. This is a hyper-competitive and money-hungry libertarian society. lot of this. Number 2, this is taking place in the past. A lot of players won't have the discernment to be able to pick out like what actual year these align to. That's okay. Old-fashioned, but relevant to the people in the game world is like that's really the heart of what we need to get across. So that's enough. Number 3, objectification of women, still in full swing. Number 4, we have real-world diseases here, and at least one company thinks it can cure them. Tonics are, in the game, are an in-game item used by the player character to, I don't know, gain various effects. So it makes sense that everyday people might have a more grounded use for them. So it's tying in a usable item with something that everyday people might use. The bottom 3 are locations. They're like actual real locations in the game you can go to. So they are reminders and expectation setters for those locations. How did I make these decisions? Well, it was mostly research. The pin money ad is like just this condescending ad that's for women. It's like, oh, why don't you run over to the sale, honey? It's god-awful. This is the water we were swimming in. I looked at examples from the time. And the Limbo Room ad is supposed to seem like sexy and cool. I based it on like jazz club ads. King Pawn, it's really just supposed to remind you that this is real because you go to it. It's a location you go to, and you need to be able to recognize the crown when you go there. You need to be like, oh, I'm in that place in the poster. It's got the crown on it. That's most of its job, really. And the Eldorado Lounge in World is supposed to be for high rollers, like doing fancy things fancily. It's very self-consciously high class. And it mirrors that. It keeps the branding consistent, essentially. So it looks like a poster that bar would have approved. There's a chain of noticing here. This guy, what's this? This is a letter from Lonnie to Sam in Gone Home. We got to our standards for this game were we used real actual paper and wrote everything by hand and scanned all the documents in real life. Like we have a lot of these just exist. And so like, yeah, this was, you can tell by how messy the handwriting is. But this reminds us and gives specificity to the idea that Lonnie's dad lives in Mexico. She stays with him sometimes. Lonnie's Sam's like crush in Gone Home. She goes to visit her dad. And she has an opportunity to write some letters to Sam, which gives us evidence of her in the house, even though she's not in the house. Very useful. It reminds us of Lonnie's like whimsy and creativity. It gives a lot of personality to her, which is very cute and nice. Here's all the pieces that I made this of. The letter that's inside it that you read is actually the real letter folded up in there. I just took it out and scanned it separately. I got an address from a friend who lived in Mexico, and I changed some digits, and I made the stamp as a knockoff from those other stamps that you can see on the side. I changed all the copyrightable things, and an upside down stamp, which is what we got here. It's upside down. Upside down stamp means I love you. Secret message. It's very cute. But this was just all the little pieces of this that I made to make it seem like a real object. So yeah, this is the Apollo Air ticket book and it was from 1939 from Minerva's Den. So this Apollo Airlines here, this reuse. Apollo Airlines was the airline that Jack flew on in BioShock 1. It's the plane goes down. It's at the beginning. This we were going to reuse it. The reuse of it, it's got pros and cons. A big caveat. So this is the porter's ticket to London when they're going to go to London for the war effort. They flew on the same airline. This reinforces the idea of Apollo Airlines as a legit airline, like it's used more than once. It's cool, it makes the world detail a little more reliable, but also as far as the player knows, it's the only airline. There's no other airlines in these games. They haven't been told about any others. So if you're not careful, reusing concepts too much can make the world feel small and pathetic. If the web of ideas in the world building of a game has too few points to connect to, it won't really feel like there's a big complex world out there. It'll feel like there's only a few things that matter. It can feel claustrophobic. This is entirely a judgment call. It's like what you value, and you're like, am I willing to play on this side or that side? Sometimes it's the right move to reuse and reinforce ideas, and sometimes it's the right move to invent more ideas to hint at complexity and more things in the world. In Minerva's Den, we wanted that connectivity. We felt that the connectivity with BioShock 1 was worth the risk. So we wanted to underline that this is the same place. This is the same world as BioShock 1. So the pros outweighed the cons. And the other important thing about this ticket booklet is that it reminds you of all the ways that we don't travel like this anymore. This is different. Like the period style and the way that like the gate agent like writes your names on it and stuff, and it's a cute little booklet that you can that they print out and you can open and tear out your tickets and stuff. We don't have this anymore. It's just a good period reminder. So along those same lines, we made reference to the BioShocks and Gone Home, and I reused the airline again. This is a slightly different pro and con situation. Gone Home, while at heart it is a BioShock design-wise, doesn't have any official connectivity. This comes down to making a reference to a game owned by another company in your game. And this is a bit at tying the worlds together that is less easily accepted in the worst case. Yet the player is taken out of the game when they notice it. They're like, this is connecting to something that isn't this world. Their belief in Gone Home's world as an internally consistent one may be challenged. Even just for a moment, you don't want too much of that. But in this case, the team was like, no, we want the reference. So I was like, all right, let's do it. So what I did is I figured in the intervening 56 years that there'd be a logo update, and I did a lot of research on that. And the boarding passes, you can see how different they look in the 90s. The one weird thing that I did here was decide arbitrarily that the Apollo Airlines hub was in Cincinnati, which, if you spent time in the States, this doesn't make any sense. Cincinnati doesn't have anything. It's not very big. I was implying an alternate history in which Cincinnati had the infrastructure to support being a major airline hub, and it's replaced Chicago in this map. And honestly, the reason why is I felt like it. O'Hare, it's not Chicago O'Hare. It's not a fun airport. Maybe Cincinnati would be better. I don't know. But yeah, the alternate history here being that because Ohio is where a lot of the early flight stuff happened, maybe somebody, got big there early and really figured out a lot of things and founded a commercial airline early and became the center of air travel. It's alternate history is, we got a lot of it, and that's most of what BioShock is, so may as well. So here's some silly world building we did on Tacoma. We decided that in the world of Tacoma, a significant amount of user experience stuff, like the actual design of everyday things, has become terrible or convoluted or awkward. And it's a little bit of a statement on the regressive nature of capitalism, but also it was fun and hilarious. You'll notice that all these objects suck. Half a frying pan, how are you gonna cook with that? What are the corners? What do you do with a spatula? How do you do that? Have you ever tried to drink out of a square sake cup? It's really hard. And that thing on the right, that's a toothbrush. It grosses me out. It's disgusting. So this is world building, actually. The world of Tacoma is not always ergonomic and well thought out. In some ways, this user unfriendliness also foreshadows and at least supports the hostile corporate behavior that you learn about later in the game. These objects are kind of funny and they seem harmless, but they're actually a symptom of something much worse. And they do connect to that theme, but also they're funny. So the process goes like this for me. The examples I'm going to show you are period pieces, so they have their own particular requirements, but hopefully it won't be that hard to figure out how to apply this elsewhere. So you always got to start with the research. When you don't research, you reach for a cliche. Don't do it. This was research for a game that was originally set, well, it wasn't set in the 60s, it was set in like the 2000s, but it was essentially like, there was a house that had been sealed up since the 60s, so there was going to be all this 60s stuff in it that was like in terrible shape, but by the time this game shipped, all this stuff was gone and the game was different. I had left, so the time period was not the same. This stuff never shipped. Here are some, but I have some documents of the process. So that was for the magazine. Here's from Serial Box. Here's some of the reference I found. 60s cereal boxes, they have pretty strong 60s identity, but when you have all this research, you have to figure out what elements of the reference give you the identity you're looking for. Like, what's the commonalities? What's the distinctive elements? What parts seem out of the ordinary? Distinctive elements are always really useful to find and make use of. They often hold the strongest connectivity to the source material for the player to understand. Pretty much all, so my analysis was like, pretty much all these cereal boxes have a mascot. Circus and zoo animals, pretty popular. Nearly all of them have photos of the actual cereal composited in. Color choices are all over the map. It's actually a little hard to organize the colors into a palette, but one thing that is unusual and distinctive is a white background, which you don't see on cereal nowadays much. It's very interesting. So that stuck in my head. This analysis helps me like narrow the problem space, helps me like identify the trends and stuff that I can then use. So for the magazine, I was lucky to find a referent that was really distinctive in its layout. If you look at enough magazines, you'll notice that a lot of them are really boring. And so like this one, this has a lot of information and it has a really graphic treatment. This is a big help. So if you compare this one to the one on the right, this is based entirely around a photo over there. In the modern style, like a lot of our modern magazines are like this, it has hardly any text. It relies completely on the photo. It has to carry all the period signifiers. So if you have the right photo, this is really easy to make. But if you don't, you might be hosed. Sometimes it's really hard to hit those markers. It can be hard to find a licensable image. It can be definitely hard to modify a photo you took like currently to look like it belongs in a time period. If there's any difficulty with getting the right photo, the whole cover falls apart. So like it's kind of a fragile paradigm in this situation. The left-hand one is more resilient. It has a lot of small photos and text that goes with them. There's less pressure on each element. So, and it comes together to feel very full. So what I did in this case was I started the layout and added some elements. I had a new title, and I stole what I could because this is so good. And like essentially, you start mocking it up and you assess it against the reference. And like usually you have more than one reference, but this was the only one I found of this one, so I was using this very heavily. But you can determine if you're going in the right direction. Much easier. You just directly compare them. Compare it against your reference. There's always something you can grab. And you continue to compare against reference and refine, or go back and be like, this isn't working, and do something else until you're done, or you go mad. Whatever comes first. These are finished assets. I couldn't find the cereal box with the dirt layer, so the dirt layer is only on the magazine. I'm sorry. I didn't go into this because I didn't have time in the slides, but I made this spoonbill because it's a cereal mascot, and it's eating with a spoon on its beak. Anyway, it's really irritating. But you can, you get the idea. Brief reminder of how important logos are. There's logos on everything. And all these have to have some thought put into them. The lab-grown meat certification, the like goofy boy band, the Indian candy label, the nonprofit word mark, you name it. All this stuff has logos and color schemes and specifics for how they appear on objects in the world. I think this is the last big one. So these are magazines from Tacoma, and magazines and ads, these all tie into the world strongly, and they're all creepy in some way. As always, like power advertises in propagandistic ways. Like they're trying to, these are supposed to reflect the way that everyday people are expected to think, and like the bullshit they're expected to live with. We got a pharmacy megacorp, like, advertising clearly to kind of older people, trying to get them to use a dodgy sleep medication. It's very like, I'm a mom. I don't have time for insomnia. That's why I request it, and you can hopefully feel the tone here that the corporation here thought would really hit the notes. This medication it's creepy, lightly implied, very scary. But like this is convincing old people to try scary drugs. Like this is something that makes money for them, and that's what they love. These magazines teach us that health and pharmaceuticals and education are big business, at the very least. The important other thing is that these magazines, these are like the back or front of magazines, and in the game they are in the space of specific crew members. They're connected to them. They wouldn't have nearly as much to say if they weren't tied to a person. When you know who has been reading them, you know more about that character. If nobody on board Tacoma cared about fitness, this fitness magazine wouldn't have a job. It talks about the world, but it's much more interesting when a character is using it for information. It would be mostly wasted. Let's not do that. Yeah, I had to cut my books for time, but I made so many individualized books for all the characters in their spaces, and they're all very specific. I'm probably out of time. I am really running low. Here's a few takeaways. Beware of building too much world for the game. When you're like, oh man, I got all these freaking sweet ideas and the story doesn't call for it, like the player can tell when you're trying to jam ideas in that don't have a place. It's a really sad situation to be in, where you have cool ideas that will not fit. Always do your research. Don't rely on cliches. Look and see what's out there. I know it's harder now because image search is hell and you can't find anything ever, but like there are some ways. There's here and there. Just don't rely on what your image in your head is of something, because there'll always be something interesting to find out about the real thing itself. If you're trying to make props feel real, it's all the little details. You got to literally like check all the boxes. You got to be like, this is important, and it's the concatenation of little pieces that make you feel like it's an actual object. And it has the added benefit of making it clear that that asset was cared about by whoever made it, and it's just by definition going to be more interesting because of that. And finally, make sure you know your messages and tones. Mismatching these can be disastrous. Make sure you know what you're trying to say with any given object, with any given asset, and have ways to say it. Sometimes you have to find your way to this, but it's worth it. Here's a couple weird images I found while I've been searching. I love them. They're my favorite. You can bug me on the internet if you want to. That's me. And okay, I think it could be question time. Yay. Thank you. Oh, you have a question. You don't think that his name, Blackie Carbon, is enough? You don't know who that is? These are personifications of bad things that can happen to the inside of your car if you use the wrong oil. So knock and ping are like engine noises that are bad, and so like they're like, if you're using the wrong gas, the wrong oil, this gangster is going to make your car knock and ping, and We all know about gummy rings. Anyway, we all know that guy. I can't see anything. God help me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this talk. I loved it.
Thanks.
So my question is, because you already mentioned it, with AI, it's getting a lot harder to find reliable historical sources.
Yeah.
Do you have any strategies / go-to sites where you go to specifically find visual references and research?
These days, it is hard. Flickr still exists. Flickr is out there. You can search by, you can still search by year if you're looking for historical stuff. And literally, if you are searching in there, put in each year. Be like 1929. 1928, put in, and you will get different results sometimes. It's still out there. You can also still find Creative Commons attributions images on there. You can search by license, and that can be a huge help if you just want to license an image. And like attribution was my favorite for Tacoma and Gone Home. We did a lot of we used a lot of other people's images, and they're in the credits. We attributed them, and extremely helpful. There is a website that I was recently introduced to that I can't remember the name of that has a lot of great images. Can't remember what it is. I'd have to look at my desktop at home. It starts with an A. But yeah, I don't. This hasn't been my literal all-day job for some years now, and stuff has sure changed in the meantime. But yeah, Flickr's really good. Try different search engines, essentially. Like, try all of them and see what you come up with. There is always the, God, rephrase things. Like, just wherever you're looking, try to think of different ways to phrase what you're looking for, and dig around on the web pages that they link to. This used to be so much easier, and now it is worse, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thank you so much, though. That's really helpful.
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, I find your work stunning.
Thank you.
And
That's nice.
I was very curious to know, in your experience, how much does the world end up shaping the story versus the other way around?
Yeah.
And specifically, how is it affected by that first decision between defining the whole world first versus the fog of war approach?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, it super depends. But yeah, if you design the whole world first, like that's common, or I've seen it a lot in like more open world games where they're like, we know we have to define a whole lot of things because we don't know when the player is going to interact with any given thing, so we can't like reveal things on a schedule necessarily. Maybe somewhat, but so like that often is the case there. If it's like a bigger, more open worldy world, then you might want to just design a lot of that to begin with. For me, in the stuff I work on, it's always like we at least have a spine of the story. We have the basics, and then I can be like, okay, how can we concretize these things? Like, how can we? Because like in Gone Home and stuff, the name of the game was like, here's all the things that happen to the characters. These are all just like ideas in a doc. Like they haven't been shown to the player in any way yet. So we had to determine like what things of those could be an audio diary, what things could be shown by having a physical object like a letter or anything, or a book or something like that can be the sort of touch point for that idea. And so like, yeah, these games that I was talking about, they have a very specific way of getting this stuff across. So their requirements were a lot narrower than a lot of other games. So honestly, in a lot of ways, that made it easier, and it was cool. But yeah, it's less easy in games where it's less clear-cut. But I think just it is really easy to let your imagination run away with you when you're planning everything out, and you're like, oh, we got these guys here, we got the order of nuns that are doing this, and you're like, where is it going to go? Where does it go in the game? It has to go there first. So I always find it better to respond to a need, but that's me. That's just me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hello? Yeah.
Hi.
So I think it may be a bit of a rambling question, but essentially it comes to when you are making because there's a lot of text in many of those props, especially on the magazine covers. How much coordination do you feel is needed between the writing department or do you consider how much revision there needs to be to some of those texts, like to be approved, or if there's a big enough team? I mean.
Yeah. So when I started out in the BioShock stuff, I had to get approval for a lot of things because I was very low in the structure and I didn't have a lot of autonomy. But by the time we got to Gone Home, I didn't have to check so much. Occasionally I would get a note, and the writer would be like, "Yo, you can't." You can't do this. This isn't what I want here, or whatever. And I'd be like, fine, it's okay. But yeah, by the time we got to Tacoma, it was mostly just me doing what needed to be done because I understood everything. Because I'm always really involved with the story. I always do a lot of narrative work on any given game, and so. I at least have a pretty good idea of what's required. And like fundamentally a lot of these things, because they are connected with a character, it's like I know that character and I know what they're like and I know what kinds of things they would want or do or be interested in. And so that really helps me figure out what's appropriate, because it's just like get inside their head and be like, what flavor gum is their favorite? And it's real. Like, I've done it. It sounds silly, but it's true.
Thank you very much.
Are we done?
Are we done? Oh my God, we're 26 seconds over, you guys.
Thank you.
All right, we're done. Yay. Thank you. Thank you for looking at all my silly slides. Freedom. We can leave now. No.